Welcome to the Courageously Candid Coaching Podcast. I'm Matthew Radley, CEO of MRA Executive Coaching, and this is the podcast where we say it as it is, where we are courageous and candid combined. We'll be stepping away from our professional corporate profiles and instead delving deep into the lives of global leaders and expert coaches, inviting them to go back to a moment in their lives of shift, stretch, or stillness, a moment where everything changed. My guest today is Lisa Wheatcroft, Chief People Officer and Non-Exec Director. Lisa has both been coached by MRA as well as being sponsor for Executive Board Development, where coaching played a significant role in preparedness for the cultural integration of two entities, both requiring a high level of emotional stability. We'll understand from someone with executive experience and accountability exactly what you should not do and what it has taken to find resilience and bravery to stay the course herself. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Let's start at the very beginning of our relationship, your introduction to MRA. Where did we start and how come you're still with us here today?
Yeah, so I was introduced to MRA through a previous HR director colleague as she was transitioning out of her role and I was transitioning in. You may remember it was my first day.
I do.
Supporting the business when I met MRA, and you were coaching the executive team of which I'd just joined. So I think I noticed at that point actually the balance between really being able to stop the team in a candid moment and bring that real honesty and transparency to it, as well as being really supportive, which I get now is a theme of your business. So I remember that at the time and being really kind of impressed with that insightful ability to be able to do that. So I think for me that set up our ongoing relationship because we were able to kind of work together then to bring the best about that team coaching relationship.
Nice. What a first day.
Yes, it was a big first day. Yeah.
For many reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've brought you here to talk about, I guess, knowledge and experience of merger and acquisitions, cultural integrations. You'll have seen it in the past, the good, the bad, the ugly. So, over to you. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Wow, really open question. So that brings up the coaching style. Yeah, I've had experience actually of working in these types of cultural integration where it's been in a merger and acquisition, some private equity investment, or more recently as we've worked with businesses where in the rail industry where the franchise or the concession has taken over. So quite different environments with quite different styles of the organisation leading it, and also worked with loads of HR colleagues and different people who've had various different experiences in these situations. So I think what I noticed is actually the good, if we're starting with that, the good is that there's always this huge ambition around the acquisition. It's always because it's a jewel in the crown or it's a fantastic business to acquire, and there's loads of ambition and loads of good thinking up front, I think, to kind of get the business and make sure that it's in the right place to start with. I think what doesn't go so well is that often day one is seen as the finish line. So we've acquired the business or we've started the business or we've started the mobilisation of the franchise or concession, and that feels like the finish line. You know, we've got it now, whereas actually that should be the starting line. And really the hard work should start then in terms of how do you integrate that business, the operating system, the people all together and really get the value out of that.
With your experience then, let's go straight in and go hard on this one. So what do you see executive teams consistently missing, and why is it just not good enough? Why are they actually underperforming as an executive team as a result of that choice or behaviour?
Yeah, I think, and you would expect me to say this, I'm an HR director, but they consistently miss the people element of it. So I find that often the focus is really on the nuts and bolts around the finances, operations, making sure day one works well. So there's often very limited focus on the people strategy around change. And there's an element, I think, where leaders feel like we've got the business now, it's just business as usual, let's just carry on. And expecting the culture and the ways of working just to merge in together. I actually listened to in preparation for this, listened to a podcast where they were talking about, you know, if a small business is acquired by Apple, they're not thinking Apple are going to change to be us. They think we need to change to be Apple. But I think when there's organisations that are of similar tenure and similar size, then often the kind of delineation between those two cultures and two businesses is quite extreme. And there isn't often enough thought about how those things come together and how that real informal success of the the current operating system then helps build value for the new organisation.
So the winning of the hearts and minds piece is the thing that's really missing.
Yeah.
Because there's that transition, isn't there? As the old organisation was leaving, there'll be a set of behaviours and impact on the culture and the people there. And like you say, it's that missing bit when that new organisation comes in. You know, whose shoes are they filling? What do they want to set out to do? Yeah, what does it need to look and feel like to now be part of this new world, new organisation? And that, from what you're saying, it feels like that's often the piece that isn't really considered in a way that it should be.
Yeah, I think it's often missing, and everyone's quite keen to just get going into business as usual without thinking about what is the strategy here. So it's often, I think it does come down to the leadership. The leadership can be focused on the tactics of the short term instead of thinking strategically, what do we want to achieve with the culture here? And obviously offline, we talked about earlier about that clarity point. So I think organisations often miss what is changing, what is staying the same, what do we want to collaborate on to change, and what is just mandated, and what does that look like? And then what's the clarity on how we're going to get there? So often, you see organisations coming together, it's a period of unrest for the colleagues. They're scared, they're unsure, and then they have all of this change around them, which isn't necessarily communicated, or it's not easy to navigate through.
So let me just check in now. So I guess 30 years of a career in HR for myself and coaching and leadership, I have never seen a cultural integration go well.
Yeah.
Now that's quite a big statement. We have never seen, and when we talked about this earlier, we have never seen a cultural integration go well. So with all the knowledge, all the expertise in the world, we're collectively saying it doesn't work. What do we want to do about that?
Yeah. Again, kind of thinking about this in coming up to this podcast, I've thought the same. I've never really seen it go well either. So it was interesting to hear you say that. And I think it literally boils down to the fact that there's never a people strategy around how do we bring that together. So the people strategy might be about the future of the new organisation, or it might be around how do we exit the old organisation, but there's never one, I've never seen it anyway, where there's one about how that bridges the two gaps together. So what do we want to bring from the old organisation, what do we want to bring into the new organisation, and what do we want to take forward, and what does that mean for everybody, what are those change mechanisms, and thinking about things like, I suppose, how do you use influencers and people in the organisation to really collaborate with them? So one thing I have heard of being doing well, not seen doing well, is actually where the leadership team will set the direction and then work with people in the organisation to say, what do we want this culture to be? And how do we want to bring it to life? What needs to change? What needs to stay the same? And then looking at that whole operating system, whether it's processes, procedures, ways of working, and working together to make that happen, instead of literally taking a new set of rules or a new set of principles and just landing them in the business and expecting everyone to get on with it. So I think there's something there about collaboration around it. So having really clear structure and strategy, collaborating with the business and the people in the business, and using those people who are experts, have got good tenure, who've got respect in the organisation, to be able to take that forward.
Almost like your ambassadors.
Yes, absolutely.
Handholders from the old to the new. I really like that thought.
So if we were to hold exec teams to account, CEOs, MDs, executive teams to account around this, because ultimately that is their responsibility, let's just kind of go through the lens of, if they only had one thing that they focused on as an executive team, rather than it being, we'll give this to the HRD to do because it's people-y and it's change, but as a collective organisation and team, they've only got one thing to do. What's the one thing?
It would be to collaborate on a great change management strategy for people across the board, rather than individual silos of, I look after finance, I look after HR, I look after operations, which is typically what happens in these scenarios, because the ramp up of volume of activity is quite significant and happens quickly. So it's easy to become dispersed. So I think providing that absolute leadership in what are we going to change and how are we going to change it, and how we're taking people on the journey and winning the hearts and minds, is absolutely critical.
There's something quite powerful as well, I think, about a new exec team having a shared goal to work across rather than their own vertical sets of objectives and goals, and that sort of building those relationships, because actually that's where the culture starts, right? From the top, and the role modelling of this is how we want you all to work collectively behind this mission, these values, whatever that might be. Because often they come in and they're wanting to earn their stripes and prove that they're in the right vertical, and that's where their focus goes. Because I think that's one of the things we see most often with senior teams. They don't really work as a team across real shared, cultural, organisational wide goals. They're there for their vertical piece, and that's where their focus tends to be.
I would agree, and I think that's where over time that the team comes together, but often those initial objectives are around either cost cutting or operations. It's never around people, actually. No one says let's give everyone a great experience here through this merger, or let's integrate this culture really well and let's share that ownership. I read a McKinsey stat, and I think it said that if organisations who've got great cultural change programs, cultural integration programs, are 50% more successful in an integration, and that's through adding value of the new business. It's through the cost-cutting measures or any efficiencies they need, and it's through those targets that they have around just creating sustainable leadership of the organisation. So 50% better just by having a cultural integration programme.
That tends not to be budgeted for,
Yes.
and therefore doesn't happen. Okay, so let's talk about your own experience then. Let's go in a bit harder. One of your biggest regrets in terms of your role on leading an executive team through a sort of M&A merger acquisition style of integration?
It's a hard question, isn't it? Because often you learn on the job. So and I suppose that is my regret. When I look back, I was involved with a business who had a significant amount of private equity funding. They were an entrepreneurial organisation and had great respect for the entrepreneurs, but didn't really know how to lead culture and what culture was and how that would impact the business. So they had a really high turnover of people, but they had a real love for the people and for the business, but just didn't know how to kind of bring that to life. I came in as the chief people officer at that time, and there was a obvious different disconnect because a private equity company wanted to realise the financial value. So there was a real pull and push. And I think, I learned a lot from that experience, but my biggest regret is that I didn't do some external referencing and talk more to people who've been through these things and really kind of immerse myself into what is going on here and how do we really bring value to the organisation. So I think we got there in the end. However, I look back and think until you've done it, you don't know what you're facing. And I see that now with some businesses that I'm working with where there's a huge cultural challenge, but they're not yet aware of that and haven't yet done the due diligence around that cultural change to be able to really tackle it properly.
Lovely. Really lovely. And so if we take it then through the lens of the person maybe who's new into the organisation, maybe in their first role in an organisation. So we've talked about the exec. Let's kind of go all the way through now. What's the problem that we're facing in a merger and acquisition style moment within a business? What's the impact that happens right down on the ground? Take it from a sort of, I guess, experience plus psychology sort of moment. What do you see happening to those individuals at the very early stages of their career?
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it? It almost seems obvious, but I don't think it is necessarily obvious to you. You've seen it, but I think there's a massive disconnect in terms of how they feel about the organisation, which obviously leads to lack of engagement, lack of empowerment, lack of clarity, and not really knowing what they're doing. So the efficiency of the organisation just almost grinds to a halt. And again, I can see that in numerous businesses that I've worked with recently, where the impact is so huge that strategically, some of the talent might leave, the performance objectives won't be met, and there'll be real kind of slowness in terms of the momentum of the organisation.
So performance and productivity impact, obviously, psychological state of safety and valued, all the basic human needs not being met. So I guess with that in mind, if you were leading on a board as an exec member, the next acquisition, of an organisation, mindful of what it feels like to be in that baseline role, in those early days roles, what else would be really important to you so that we maintain and increase productivity rather than lose it?
Yeah, I think good question. I think for me, it all goes back to leadership. So when I think about either integrations or change within a business, because it almost is one in the same, where you've got huge organisational change, when I've seen it done really well is when there's really strong leadership. So the leader, the MD, the CEO is out there with a clear narrative, absolute clarity on what we're trying to achieve and why, and then really making sure that the leadership team are working together. So it's an integrated plan that everyone's working on together, and it's measured, the success is measured, and there's a pulse check and a temperament check throughout. And I've been lucky to work with great leaders who've been able to do that, and who've had the skill set and kind of courage to be able to just put themselves out there actually. And I think probably what I would do differently again if I was in another integration or M&A activities, just to bang the table a bit harder and be more courageous around, we need to do this because this is the impact. And often as an HR director, you'll take a more coaching approach or ask those difficult questions. But I think it is absolutely critical to show leadership and help leaders move forward as well, because often people just don't know how to do it.
Go on then, be courageously candid, because that's the name of the podcast. So what would you do when you bang your fist on the table? What would you say? What do you actually want to say as a human being versus the slightly more professional interpretation? Come on, get rid of the job title. This is Lisa. You're going to bang your fist on the table and you are going to be courageously candid, and you are going to say what?
And I'm questioning myself really, because I think I probably do it, but it's probably more about my style. So I think I would candidly question what the leadership team thought was the impact on the organisation, on the people. I would candidly question what the impact might be more in the commercial side of things. And I'm working with a business that's less commercial at the moment, but when I have been in those really value, cash-driven organisations, then it's much easier to have that conversation and kind of be able to bring that to life. So and I think I would probably try to bring more about, well, what would that feel like for you if you had no leadership and no clarity, and somebody had just taken a step back and said, let's just see what happens here. Then, what would that feel like? So I'd try to bring more of a human element about it, which I'm sure during our coaching conversations with a pair of you, we've both talked about how we do that and how you can actually, instead of mentoring and giving advice, it's more about trying to bring it so it's a very personal experience for somebody.
Nice.
I love that. And I think, what you're talking about here is really creating that sense of belonging, belonging into the team, belonging into the conversation, but belonging to the new organisation, having people with a really clear vision, that come with me and we're not going to do this to you. Because I think that's what you're talking about in terms of, the exec team, they come in, they think day one is the end and it's actually the beginning, to use your phrase, and they're there to do a job and they just get into that sort of delivery mode, but have forgotten all the people that work throughout that organisation who have essentially lost their identity, so therefore they don't feel like they belong, and then they don't have any clear sort of leadership around this is what it means and this is how we want you to put skin in the game and to feel part of it and to sort of help build what the future is going to look and feel like. And I just wonder how many of those courageous conversations actually happen at that level.
Yeah, I think in great organisations with great leaders, they happen and they're really fruitful. But I do think you're right. Often people forget how much of a change it is. And in the current organisation I'm working with, candidly, one person grabbed me and said, I don't think anyone's thinking about how much change this is for me. So not only is it a new job, it's a new manager, it's a new office, it's a new desk, it's a new IT system. I don't know what I'm doing. Like literally don't know what I'm doing. I'm just expected to come in and get on with it. And that was, quite an extreme circumstance of something, but it really made me go, wow, even I, as a people leader and somebody who would like to think I'm relatively thoughtful about these things, hadn't thought that sitting at a different desk would affect somebody. Because it's everything, isn't it? It's everything from how do I operate on a day-to-day, where do I put my lunch, to how am I being led and what's the future of this business. And that is belonging.
So belonging actually as a theme of integration, quite a strong theme actually as a discipline. And what does belonging mean psychologically as well as intellectually and emotionally, I guess, is something we're kind of drawing into. Sitting here now with your career ahead of you, let's say you retire at some point in the future. I'm sure you will, but not for a long time.
On a beach with a cocktail, fabulous. Looking fabulous, like she always does.
When you're at that stage, looking back over your career, developing yourself through coaching qualifications and leadership, what do you think's been the greatest gift to date?
Great question. The greatest gift for me has been the ability to work with exceptional leaders and exceptional coaches. And often they're one in the same thing. So I've worked with people in organisations that will be in my circle forever, because what they've done is either help me through coaching conversations, through great leadership, or they've led an organisation in such a respectful and tremendous way that it's made me want to kind of learn from them continually. So I would like to think that by the end of my career, I've honed my skills enough to be able to be seen as that person as well. But that takes time, and it takes energy, and it takes learning and all of those things to kind of take yourself forward. But certainly when I look back, I think it's the leaders who've had really great coaching conversations with me and created a shift, or introduced me to coaching and enabled that a formal executive coaching, so there's a different shift.
Okay, nice. So let's talk about your experience of being coached just really briefly as we come towards the end of the conversation. So what's the most courageously candid coaching experience that you have had that's really shifted the dial for you? Really shifted the dial?
I've thought about this a lot coming into this, and I think I've had 3 or 4 kind of very dial shift moments. So I'll kind of summarise and skip over. We can pick the best. But I remember going into a new role in the aviation industry, and I worked for someone who was a great leader who I've just referenced. And I remember being on the phone to him, and I was totally overwhelmed. And he said, "Stop, I'm coming to see you." And he drove over to the other side of the airport, and I was nearly in tears. And he just sat me down, relaxed, sat back, and coached me for 45 minutes on what was going on. And it was a snap. It wasn't a part of a programme of activity. It was just a real snap. And that I remember that changing just how I worked, how we worked together, what I did differently. And I was very fortunate through those processes to have a formal coach who, again, she's still in my life now, and she's fantastic. Can't even have a cup of coffee without being coached from her. In a great way. And it's quite personal, but I think the last conversation we had in a formal coaching capacity, Matt, I was working too hard and burning the candle at both ends, for want of a better expression. I wasn't necessarily, it's not burning the candle at both ends isn't what I want to say, but I was working too hard and not focusing enough on myself actually, and that well-being. And I think I would describe what you did as just putting a pin in it for me and just really candidly said, stop here. There's something that you need to do differently. So let's go in a different direction. And I think I knew I was working too hard, and I knew I was pushing too hard. But for somebody to play it back in the way you did, actually, it was a real moment of stopping and, right, I do need to do something different, because people can see it. It's not just me that can see it.
And how does it feel when somebody does that to you? So they're courageous enough to be candid. How does that actually sort of feel on the receiving end?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. So I can see that some people may not, but you know, I really thrive on that, because I think it is it feels like a real playback and a real sort of shifting moment. So for me, it almost gave me permission. And Sophie and I, we've had a similar conversation in a different great coaching conversation we've had through my development, where I actually feel that that's kind of just made me pause and really think and reflect and do something differently.
Nice. So what are you hearing in this conversation that feels really relevant to, I guess, the acquisition, the merger experience? What are you hearing?
In absence of a real people strategy around sort of belonging, if you like, people strategy with restructures and all that, always there, but that real positive intent from the very top around how we bring our people into what we're going to create together as something new. That whole sense of belonging, that feels so important to me.
It's interesting, because I don't think I've actually heard organisations talk about belonging in the context of change, and it's a really lovely sort of reframe on how do you create belonging programs rather than change programs, because it feels so much more personal and emotional, and it responds to everybody's needs at a different state.
Yeah.
Okay, Lisa, we're going to come to the end of the conversation. Is there anything you haven't said that you would like to say in this moment?
The piece on listening, actually, I think that it does blend in, doesn't it, to the belongings. People feel like they belong if they're listened to and cared for, and often I think organisations can come out and say, well, we're doing this, but they don't listen to what's actually happening and how people feel on the ground, and that ultimately is where things go wrong, because they're flying off in one direction, doing to the organisation without listening to what is actually really going on. And I think that's where that real collaborative people plan, strategy, whatever you want to call it, could really work, because people then feed back on what's happening on the ground, instead of it being another exec director saying to the CEO or MD, this is what people are telling me, because then it feels quite personal, as opposed to collectively, this is what the group of people are saying when I've listened to what is happening. Yeah, so I think it's a coaching principle, isn't it? But really, I think it's something that should be and could be applied in a cultural change programme.
Nice. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
bringing your truth into our courageously candid conversation, and to be able to dip the word courageously candid in. How many times? I don't know how we did that, but that was absolutely beautiful.
Didn't do it on purpose, actually. Just maybe because I could just see it on
kind
the
subconscious, subliminal. So thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank
You've
you.
been a superstar as always.
Yeah,
Thank
fantastic.
you. Perfect.
If today's episode resonated with your own experiences, take it not as advice, but as a mirror. We'll be back next time with another coaching conversation that dares to go deeper. We look forward to seeing you then for some more courageously candid coaching conversations.